I work here at DeMay Labor with my father. He started this business in 1986. I've been here for 24 years. We bring labor into the farms. We used to bring in a lot of labor out of Florida. We have now transitioned into H2A program, and we bring in about 2,000, a little over 2,000 workers a year right now, which has grown over the years a lot.
Yeah. That kind of leads me right into the first question I was going to ask you was, what have you seen the trends shifting or changing over the years since you've been doing this? And it sounds like an increased need for bringing in additional labor. Is that?
Yes. So, given with the changes in the presidents and everything with immigration, we seem to see that we were unable to get the workers to come up here for the apple harvest. So we did have to transition into the H2A program, which I was not really excited about. I will tell you, when we first decided, Dad kept saying, we've got to do this. And I kind of put my feet in the ground, didn't want to, because it's a government program. And we all know when you get into a government program, they take control. Pretty much what happened. But learning the H2A program, I found that it really does work. It's a good program. It was a good program. If they would stop changing it. They're continuously making changes and not for the better. Definitely worse for the farmers.
I hear that every day in my own household. So I can only imagine, I don't know how many farms you work with exactly, but I'm guessing you hear that from all of the farm owners you work with that are frustrated.
Yes, very frustrated. I'm always the bearer of bad news because I always get the notices and then I have to let the farmers know of these changes. One most recent change of the fee increase for the contracts and now the new asylum fee, as well as all the new wording that has had to go into these contracts for the farmers to protect, their housing and from having people come there and stay. You shouldn't have to write it in there that, they can't have overnight guests. I mean, we have to put every single thing into a contract now just to protect the farmer. Yeah. So you have people sitting behind desks that are making these changes and not really understanding it, not asking the farmers. That would be my wish, is that if they could have some kind of committee that had farmers involved, like let's ask the farmers to help make these decisions, and they don't do that.
Yeah. Can you, for people who are listening to this who maybe don't understand what the H2A program is, can you back up a little bit, talk a little bit about what the program is, what is involved to get people here, maybe, some ideas of what it might cost and what's required on the level of like the farm owner?
So the H2A program is through the government. We have to start asking for the people 75 days before the date of need. You have a 15-day window to ask for them. And if you get under that 60 days, then you don't get to ask for them for the day you want them. So you really have to pay attention to those 15 days. You send it into your state and they have to approve it. Then it has to go into USDOL. They have to approve it. Then this has to move along to Homeland Security and they have to approve it. So you do have to have approval from all three government branches. With it going to Homeland Security is where your fees start coming in. Used to be, $460 with that form that would go in. And now that is where they have increased that for small farms under 25 workers. It's still $460 with a $300 asylum fee added to it now. If you are larger than 25, it has gone up to $530 with a $600 asylum fee. They also have made it very difficult. Some farmers will have workers come from Mexico, and then they might transfer them from another farm within the United States. we used to be able to put that all on one application and they'd have to pay that one fee. Now we are no longer allowed to. It will have to go on 2 applications, 2 fees, 2 asylum fees. If you are asking for more than 25 workers to transfer, I have some farms that ask for like 26, 27, 28 workers. I'm only allowed to put 25 per application. So if they're asking for 26 workers to transfer, I have to do a whole nother application for one guy and all those fees again. So they're really, you know, hitting the farmers with those. The asylum fee is for both H2A, H2B are both paying that.
And what's that go to? Tell us more about the asylum fee.
So that is basically covering for all these all these people that are coming in illegally, that our government is letting come in. It's going to fund that program. So you have farmers who are actually, and landscapers, everybody, H2A, H2B, who are going through the government, going through the right steps, paying to get their workers here, because those fees are small compared to what the farmers have to pay. Once we have approval and we want to book these workers to come in, my farmers, we have a set amount. I work with a company down there. It is $665 per worker to get them here. Hotel, food, their consulate fee, and their bus ticket here to the farm. And the government gets to set the rate of what they have to make per year, per hour. So yeah, you're very much into the government and they make all the decisions. And then when the worker needs to go home, again, farmer has to pay the most economical way home. And if the worker wants to fly, he'll pay the difference. But that doesn't come cheap. You know, it's around $260 to $280 per guy to get them home on a bus. And then they have to pay $15.88 per day for food. So by the time the farmer's done, I would say it's about $1,000 to $1,100 a worker. That covers all the fees all the way across. It's about $1,100 worker a year per worker.
So if you're bringing in 50 guys, you're looking at a $50,000 bill.
Yes.
And then the farm is responsible to house them
for free.
Mm-hmm.
They're responsible to take them to the store weekly, to the bank. They get a day off, overtime if they work over 56 hours. They have to make at least $17.80 per hour.
Which is more than federal minimum wage.
Yeah, state minimum, New York state minimum wage being 15, it's much more than that.
So people who are coming here are getting paid more than our citizens.
Minimum wage workers.
Than our minimum wage workers. Free housing.
Free transportation.
Free transportation, so vehicles.
Yep.
And it costs the farmer $1,000 per person to get them here.
Correct. And on top of that, are those said workers have their choice whether to have taxes taken out. There's no Social Security, no Medicare, no unemployment, federal or state. So they're not contributing to any of those programs as well as making all that money.
So that, for anybody listening, should paint a picture of how dire the labor market is here in the US. If farms are willing to do that, I mean, they don't have a choice, right? But they're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when in the past you had to post a job for local citizens to have access to those jobs first, is that right?
So we used to have to put it in the newspaper. You used to have to put it in a local newspaper, and then like I would put it in other states, Pennsylvania usually. So now we do not have to do that anymore. We put it in the government. So New York State puts it on their website. and
Okay.
which has been great for us not having to pay that additional expense to put it in the newspapers, because that was another expense I had to charge the farmers. They put that on their website. I can tell you, out of, let's say, the 2,000 workers that I bring here, in a year, I might have maybe one or two farmers call and say they've had one or two people apply for those positions, and that's about it. So one or two out of 2,000. We get numerous applications from everybody in other countries, tons of them. Any farmer would be able to tell you that their email just gets bombarded, but they're all from Brazil or Africa or Mexico or wherever. None within the US.
So, there's that statistic, right? Like 2% of the population is growing food to feed the rest of us. And that 2% of the population that are farmers are struggling to find labor to harvest the crops that feed the rest of America.
Yes, nobody in the US anymore really wants to do that job anymore. And quite frankly, it's a really hard job to do. So,
And it's seasonal, it's limited. Yeah.
With these rates the government has set, you have to have people that know what they're doing and how to do it. And it is very hard to do. It is not an easy job.
Man, I know, Jason and I are constantly talking to people about agriculture and labor. And when we start to talk about like an insecure workforce here in the US, I don't think people really understand what that means and what that looks like. But this paints a pretty dire picture, I think, of, the state of the ag industry. And so what happens if the H-2A program goes away?
If the H-2A program goes away, I'm afraid you're not going to see a lot of farms around here. We're not going to have farmers because there is nobody to do it anymore. We depend on this, and that's the scary part, because the government is setting such high standards, high rates, all of these costs. You're seeing some of these smaller family farms go away. Just with me growing up on a farm here and being here, just in the last year, I've seen 2 very good family farms go away. That's what you're going to see. You're going to have to be big. You're going to have to be a big farm that can pick a lot, do a lot, and hope that this program doesn't go away, because it is the only survival of the farms around here is this H-2A program. The H-2B program is very, very broken in that they have it capped off. So you can only get a certain amount of them. And that is killing the landscapers, everybody. That is a very tough program. I don't even like doing it because I don't like to be the one to say, we just did all of this paperwork. I have to charge you for all of this paperwork. And by the way, you're not getting your people because it's a lottery and you're not getting them. That's a horrible program.
That's terrifying to think of if the H-2A program morphs into something like that.
Exactly. We better hope that that never happens. Yes, because I think last year, so H-2B is a little bit different, but there was 99,000 visas applied for and they let 30,000 come. So there was that many that did not get their people.
That's only 30%, 33%.
Yep. And they only allow it twice a year. Yes, so we better hope that H-2B does not go to that, H-2A does not go to that.
Was H-2B, in your experience, was it ever right, or has it been sort of broken from the start?
So H-2B has always been capped off, but up until about COVID hit, there was never an issue. But slowly becoming an issue that they needed people and they weren't getting them. So now, I don't know, since COVID has hit, nobody wants to work. So that's just caused a big problem. So yeah. that's where we're at now.
That's terrifying. I can't, as a farm owner, thinking about like the success of our business hinges on a government program that could go away is really scary.
They have the ultimate control. And given that, we've seen that, like they keep coming up with more regulations, more hoops to jump through. Chicago in the last couple of years has become very difficult. The wording in the contracts, as far as there was a big to do with workers being able to drive, and they wanted to call them taxi drivers, and they wanted farmers to pay an even higher rate, equipment operators. So they're always messing with it, and that is always messing with the farmers. Definitely more problems.
There's so much of a farmer's operation, let's say, that operates outside of the control of the farmer, right? Like, you look at the apple industry, and when you're growing fresh fruit, you don't get to set your prices. You have no idea how much you're going to make. It's nearly impossible to figure out what your margins are, right? Because, from year to year to year, the fees are increasing with H2A. You never know what to expect. If all of your labor is in that program, you can't plan for next year because you don't know what the rate is going to be. You don't know. The only thing we know is that overtime is continually going to decrease the threshold, right? So we have to pay overtime at 56 hours this year, and by 2032, it'll be at 40 hours. So.
Yeah, and farmers can't afford to be paying the overtime when it comes to the harvest time. So farmers can control it when it's throughout the rest of the year, and they can kind of, okay, well, we need to do this. This is more important than that. But when it's harvest, it's harvest. When it's raining or whatever, they just don't have control over all of that. So that would be my wish, is to see something about that change at some point in time, where maybe during harvest they could have some kind of something where they don't have to follow that specific rule, because apples are only going to hang so long. They have to be picked.
I was telling somebody the other day, I said, it's not like on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. we can tell the fruit stop ripening until Monday,
right?
Because we're not allowed to work. And I know, just moving from 60 hours for overtime down to 56 this year, I know the staff that works on our farm is frustrated because they want to work those hours.
Yes.
They want to work more, but because the margins are so small, it is so hard to make any money. You cannot afford to pay overtime. I mean, that's $25 an hour?
Well, the overtime is based on weighted average. So if you're an apple farmer and you're picking apples and you have so you're into a really good block and they're picking really good, so their wages are up there. So when it comes to Saturday or Sunday and you realize you've got to pick this block because they're going to fall over the weekend or whatever, right? It's going to get warm. It has to be picked. It's based on weighted average. So every guy's overtime is going to be different. So you have to have that also is figured in there. But some of them could be making 35 or more per hour because they picked in a really good block earlier that week and made a lot of, moved right along and got a lot of bins. It's based on that. So your overtime rates can be extremely high.
Sure, right. If it's just a straight hourly overtime, it's 1.5 times that 1780.
If it's hourly.
Yeah, but when
the farmer is doing the piece rate, then it's, who knows? So how do you figure? So again, like you said, you can't say, okay, well, it's going to cost me this much money to go pick that. You can't do that because, again, if you've been picking piece rate all week, you have to base it on that. So there is no way for a farmer to say, well, it's going to cost me this much to pick this weekend. Is it worth it, or am I going to lose some? Weigh out their options. They can't do that.
Yeah, it's really difficult to calculate that on the fly.
Yeah,
really difficult, and it changes.
There's people out there that can figure it out.
Shameless plug.
Right, shameless plug.
It does change. It changes with everything involved. So there's never, I mean, you work at Walmart, you can figure out exactly what the overtime is going to cost you if you need these employees to stay and do stuff. But in the orchard, everything changes it from day to day. Whether you've been able, again, if you are able to pick and you work for 3 hours or 2 hours, and then all of a sudden it starts pouring, well, you can't work anymore. But now that 7th day again is going to be, because you work 2 hours that morning, now you're into overtime there. So there's just no way for farmers during harvest to be able to figure out their costs.
Yeah. Well, even after harvest, right? When the entire harvest season is done, we know that it's so hard for farmers to figure out what it cost them to harvest that year's crop. And, you know, sometimes Jason and I, we're talking to investors frequently, right? We're asking them to invest in our business, and we have to paint a picture of like what's happening on farms today. And they look at us like there's no way that that's what's happening. You know, they can't believe it. Farms really have a nearly impossible task of figuring out how to plan for next year, because next year is not going to look anything like the previous years did. Your land might be the same, but your crop is definitely not. You have no control over the weather. You have no control over inflation. And I've been looking at inflation in terms of farm products, fertilizer, chemicals. Those have far outpaced the typical, 3 or 4% consumer like inflation rate. Those are 30, 40, 50% higher, sometimes more. Even throw in on top of that the labor issues, the H2A program constraints, and it's amazing that people even want to really do this.
So I look at things, you as well as me growing up on the farms, and boy, I look at my dad and I think, whew, I'm glad he's not farming anymore, because there is no way he could. Things are very different now from when our parents did it. I try my hardest to have things very organized for my farmers, because I always say to them, I've got this part, go be a farmer. They can't just be farmers anymore. They have to be farmers and secretaries and everything else. So I do try to at least keep that part so that they know exactly what they're going to spend. The problem is I'm like, okay, you want all these people, 20 guys, their cost is up front. So they have to pay all of this, as soon as the guys get there. Well, the government's already got their money, because they're not getting the guys without the government having their money. And then the company that works, in Mexico with me, of course, he has to be paid. So as soon as the guys arrive, so farmers have already spent all this money out and haven't even started their crop. Very, very frustrating for farmers, because everything is ahead of time. And then afterwards, they better hope that, they have a good crop. And that's out of their hands too, because they don't even get to set the price. They don't get to like a store and say, I want this much for this. The price gets told to them. So very much on the line.
Yeah. And, when you look at processing fruit, you get told the price maybe like 3 days before you deliver. Yes. And that price is fluctuating as you're delivering, right? Because based on how much is being harvested, because nobody has a true accurate picture of what's out in the field, right? There's technology that's starting to surface to help create estimates that are more accurate than anything we've had before, but that's out of touch for a lot of our small family farms. They can't afford some of that technology to do that. And nobody works together, right? Nobody's sharing information. So even if you knew exactly what was on your farm, that does nobody any good unless every single farmer knows it and every single farmer is sharing with everybody else, so that, the buyers have an idea of what's available. They can start to set prices. I don't think it's ever going to change. I don't know how until there's a way to share that kind of information and people are willing to do so, I don't know how it changes.
And speaking of sharing, farmers can't even help farmers anymore. Government has complete control of where your people are. You can't go to your neighbors when your guys are sitting for 3 days because you're caught up and your neighbor's like fruit is dropping. government has control of that as well. They can't even help each other anymore. There's no more joint contracts for the father and son farms that dad might still own some and the son owns some, but they want to work together. That has all been taken away. So joint contracts can't be there anymore. Government has complete control. I'm not sure what their end game is on all of this, but they definitely seem to make it harder and harder for farmers every year.
Do you see it? Do you see a way to change it? Like, is there, I mean, are people lobbying to try and change this? I know that you've done a lot for the local farms.
They are. I actually work with one of our assemblymen. He's downstate from us, but I take care of his farm as well. And when I sent him that letter the other day and tell him, unfortunately, your fees are going to increase and there's an asylum fee, I thought he was going to crawl through the phone. And, you know, he was immediately, why is this going on? You know, I wish that they would ask the people involved. Again, I said this earlier, they just don't seem to. It's just people that sit behind desks that just don't understand it. But I'd like to look at them and say, but when you go to the grocery store and that food is sitting there, you like to know where it comes from. They regulate everything we do, what the farmers can spray, what they can't spray, what's going on with everything. But then they'll go to the store and they'll buy produce that comes out of another country. It just kind of blows my mind. Like, they regulate everything we do, but buy stuff that's not regulated at all.
That's
So
crazy.
if I was ever going to make a change, it would be that. I would want to say to those people just that. Why are you putting all this on our farmers, but then allowing stuff to come in from other countries and you go buy it? So that would be my big question to them.
That's really interesting. I love that.
That's a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're at about time here, Dulce. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think that this will go really far in helping to educate people who are watching this and listening to this and subscribe to our podcast on what really is happening on farms today. And maybe when you go to the grocery store, people will be a little bit more thoughtful when they choose, you know, strawberries that are coming from another country instead of local, or, you know, it's hard. We're conditioned to put strawberries on our shopping list every week, or, you know, and the produce industry has made that possible for us to get fresh produce all year round. But you got to start to think a little bit more seasonally and locally, I think. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense why we're doing all of this when sitting on the shelf next to it is stuff that doesn't have any of those regulations. And how can we compete with that?
Yeah, I think people definitely need to know that and see that and realize just those things. You know, everybody looks and, oh, they're spraying or whatever. We are so regulated as to what we can do and what we can't do. But again, they'll go to the store and they'll buy something, you know, that comes from another country that's not regulated. You just have no clue what's on it, what's going on it, what's not on it. So yeah, I think that they need to open their eyes, and that's like the thing we need to get out to people, because we are losing our farms here, and we need to stop losing our farms here, because if we can't feed ourselves, I don't know who's going to feed us.
It's a really great point. Really great. All right. Well, seriously. Yeah, thank you. This was awesome. I appreciate it. And we'll start sharing it out on all of our socials and whatnot, so you can feel free to share it with whoever.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.